Hi, this is Jasmine. I'm your host today. You may recognize me from your emails as the Big Picture Therapy. Just a quick little thing about the mission of the Big Picture Therapy. It's to help pediatric therapists feel competent and inspired. And I know I've struggled with real burnout in the past as an OT working with kids. A few years back, I was working full-time, practically absent from my family. I wrote emails at like 10 or 11 at night. And I was trying to get parents to do home programs that they wouldn't do anyways. And I had constant backaches. It felt like a sinus infection that never went away. And I'd make progress with my kids, but not in the like huge shifts that I wanted. And this led to me considering quitting as an OT. And this wasn't because I wasn't enjoying my job. I loved working with kids. I just felt ineffective and like I was spinning my wheels. So getting more mentoring, investing seriously in my postgraduate education, and taking MNRI classes has been a big part of my shift. And now I see that there's like more nuanced things that I can be looking at and addressing with my kids. And for example, like, are they able to sit in a chair? Do they have that side bending strength to be able to sit and balance? Can they do more the mature pencil grasp, but can they even do like the less mature grasps? Like, how are their feet reflexes doing for balance and for their emotional regulation? There's just so many more steps to building the skills that I wanted to see, and often I was skipping the fundamental skills. So once I started to put all the pieces together, I felt a lot more competent and prepared for my sessions. And it's like I was actually able to help scaffold and build the skills step by step for these kids. And I want you guys to feel like you're doing that as well. I want you to feel like you just took a great class and you can't wait to apply what you've learned. I want you to feel that every day. I want you to have the time that you, I want you to have time for your families and to, make progress with the kids in your caseload. So that's why I'm so happy to introduce our guest speaker, Pamela Curley, today. Pamela is the co-founder of MNRI, the Masgutova Neurosensorimotor Reflex Integration Program that's helped children all over the world with reflex integration since 1987. She's known and worked with reflex integration pioneer Dr. Muskova for 25 years, and she has taught over 4,700 hours to more than 5,000 students, OTs, PTs, speech language pathologists, medical personnel, and has provided more than 7,000 hours of hands-on practical work at specialized gatherings called family conferences for developmental and learning delays, PTSD, and near fatal drowning. She's the co-founder of the Svetlana Masgutova Educational Institute and Masgutova Foundation, and she serves as the emeritus member on the board of directors. And she spearheaded the effort to bring Dr. Masgutova's reflex integration work to the US in 2003. The Masgutova Foundation just opened a graduate school in Florida, and they offer professional and developmental classes taken by professionals all over the world. And if you guys have any problems with Zoom, you can always privately message Will, our regional coordinator for Europe. She's online and you can find her as our technical host for today. And she's also just huge credit to her. She's helped organize this. She made the PowerPoint amazing, and she's really holding together a lot of the background of this event. So thank you, everybody. And here is Pamela.
Okay, welcome everybody. I am so excited to be here. Jasmine was just curious a few months ago about things on her website, and she wanted some feedback. So I said, well, let's call and talk. And I ended up meeting the most lovely person. And we just had so much fun talking. And she just had this thought. She said, wow, you know, I'm enjoying MNRI so much, I really want to share it with others. And so we just decided to put a lecture together. So we are so thrilled to be here. Let's see if I can get my PowerPoint to go. There we go. And so all the disclaimers are normal here. And there's really, I'll give you a second to look at it. But okay, yeah, so no videoing of it. You guys, here's the deal. Let me give you a big picture. Don't worry about the information and wishing you had it. What the thing is that Will and I are going to put this lecture together to hand out to everybody. that you can share it with other people, that you can get it out to as many people as you're interested in sharing it with. We're looking at putting it in foreign languages. So don't be concerned. Oh my gosh, I need to have a picture of that. You'll get it. Okay, so those will be available, but what we wanted to do is make the video without your picture on the side, so that as it goes around the world, you don't have to have your face in every version of it around the world, if that makes sense. Okay, so it will all be available. So what I'd like to do first is to start with a short introduction to MNRI. Now, let me also tell you this. Everything that you see, Will has put together a form that has all of the links that you would need to use to see the things that you're going to be seeing here. So this is on YouTube. She'll explain where to go, what the link is to find it. So if you want to go back and review this, it will be available in a form that she'll be mailing to you when this is finished. So this is an introduction to MNRI.
Welcome to MNRI, a comprehensive set of programs serving hundreds of thousands of people on 6 continents. M stands for Masgutova. N stands for Neurosensorimotor. R stands for Reflex. I stands for Integration. Dr. Svetlana Masgutova, creator and founder of the Masgutova method, began her research into this work in the 1980s, based on extensive work she provided to victims of man-made and natural disasters. What did she discover? She discovered the missing link. She found that working through subcortical neurological pathways allowed a connection between specific and precise sensory input and the universal genetically coded motor response pattern. Simply stated, when the sensory system, such as touch, sound, or a movement, sends signals to the brain, the information is processed and sent back with instructions for motor movement patterns. The MNRI program adds the base to the triangle, creating and ensuring clear and accurate communication between the sensory and motor systems. How is this achieved? We work to integrate the primary reflex patterns with the subcortical pathways, including the extrapyramidal nerve system and lower motor neurons. These primary reflexes begin in utero and should complete their myelinization and maturation by the age of 2. These primary reflexes eventually serve as pillars and become the neurological foundation of everything we do. Here's a metaphor which demonstrates integrated reflexes. Babinski, foundational for grounding and stability. Spinal gallant, foundational for flexibility in the spine. Spinal Perez, foundational for postural control. Asymmetrical tonic neck reflex, foundation for auditory skills. Symmetric tonic neck reflex, foundational for visual skills. Leg cross flexion extension, foundational for walking. However, if these basic reflexes do not mature and integrate, or if they're inhibited, the support system is missing. Birth traumas, genetic or environmental influences, accidents or illnesses will prevent or damage the development of these pillars of life. We are left with compensations. Would you like to know how we work with these reflexes? Here's one simplified example. We simply hold and activate the sensory stimulus while simultaneously teaching the correct motor pattern. For grasp, the sensory stimulus is at the top of the palm, and the correct motor pattern response should look like this. Sensory plus reflex motor pattern equals blueprint and foundation for writing, typing, drawing, and higher levels of dexterity. Is it okay with you if simple is profound? One final question. Why is the Masgutova method so successful? We start from the ground up. You wouldn't build your house on a foundation that isn't stable, would you? Neither would we. The traditional approach to any form of physical, mental, genetic, or birth trauma recovery is through the cortex. This relies heavily on verbal questions or instructions or explanations. This is synonymous to building a house by starting on the roof, which represents the cortex. In contrast, the Masgutova method is a subcortical approach to establish the mandatory foundation to build with stability from the bottom up. This strengthens the nervous system, stress resilience, and neuroplasticity. That's why MNRI works with every body. Whatever your age, whatever your challenge, whether you're working with learning, developmental, or speech delays, or if you're recovering from an injury such as a concussion, stroke, or a traumatic event in your life, you will want to return to the foundation for support. The Masgutova Foundation. Find out more about the missing link at www.masgutovafoundation.org or www.masgutovamethod.com.
Okay. So that is available, as I say, in YouTube. In YouTube. So it's a nice summary. It just helps people to understand. And it was so cute to watch Jasmine when it said, "Is it okay if simple is profound?" This big smile came over her face because I can tell who's had a class and who hasn't yet. Those who know what that means, it is. And that is one of the first questions I will ask people. Is it okay if simple is profound? Because these are approaches that are reproducible, that we can share and show others how to do. And the results really are very, very profound because we're working at the deepest level of the function we're looking for. So we have two institutes. One is the Svetlana Educational Institute in Orlando, and the other is the Dr. Svetlana Masgutova Institute in Poland. And those are the two main institutes that govern the work. And the work is used worldwide. We have a team that has worked with over 36,000 children and adults with all manner of challenges. It can be cerebral palsy, it can be traumatic brain injury, birth traumas, neurogenetic disorders, autism, post-trauma, PTSD. Whatever challenge is there, this work will help you to build the foundation that you need to help them get through that challenge and start opening up their gifts and possibilities. And we do teach classes all around the world. And as Jasmine mentioned, I've had the honor of teaching 5,000 people in different cities, countries, states, and most of them are OTs, PTs, but we also have parents and massage therapists and lot of different backgrounds are interested in this. Now, what I want to do first is to point out a few words that we use that are very important and very key to our work. So Masgutova is the creator, and let me show you her. So this is Dr. Svetlana Masgutova. So she has a doctorate in developmental and educational psychology in Russia. She has a postdoctorate. She was a dean. She's a researcher. She's a lecturer. She has many publications, and she is the creator of MNRI. Now, what I'd like to do is comment about this first thing up here. She was a teacher, a professor in a university in Russia. And in her training, they learned about reflexes. As a psychologist, it was not limited to the mind. She learned about the body. She learned about the body and how reflexes affect psychology. So she had a bigger picture. I don't know what happened when psychology came to the United States. Somebody through the the body out and just kept the mind, and we worked with the mind only. But Dr. Masgutova knew that we have to work with both. So our work was founded originally on working with people with trauma and with PTSD. She worked with people who were in the Chernobyl accident, with the Baku War, the Armenian War. There was a train accident in a city called Ufa, and it was a very big story. There's a book about it that you can get for free off of our website. But long story short, it was a horrific, terrible train accident. And so hundreds and hundreds of children and adults were severely burned. So Dr. Masgutova went to her boss and said, I need to go and help with the psychological recovery of children. I want to work with children. So that you know who this woman is, she went and volunteered 16-hour days for 3 months to help with the psychological recovery of these children. And as she's working with them, they help point out to her how they wanted to be touched, and different the requests for touch on the parts of their bodies that were not burned were different. And that's kind of the foundation. She and the children helped to create our tactile program, which is extraordinary, by the way. She also knew a lot about reflexes. I mean, she had extensive training in reflexes, and that's the developmental part of her PhD. And so she would see children do movements that were indicating that they were still using the reflexes that they used to survive the trauma. That's not efficient. And she knew that. She saw the movements and said, wait a minute, that reflex belongs to a baby, not to an adult, not to a child that's 10. So the children are stuck in their reflexes, and they're going on and on and on. And the reason that happens, you guys, when we're in trauma, the brainstem does not have a clock. It does not have a calendar. It does not know that the trauma is over. So it will keep repeating these primary reflexes when it's not necessary, and it's very inefficient. So she saw that and realized she had to develop more and more what she was coming up with, how to work with reflexes. So that's the background to the work. Uh-oh, wanted to go the other way. Boom, boom, other way. Okay, that went fast. Okay, so Masgutova, neurosensorimotor. This was explained well in the video. Boy, just touchy. So just look at the sensory at the bottom. That's going to be some sort of a stimulus that's going to send the afferent nerves up to the brain to give information to the brain. We got to move. So the afferent information from the sensory system is sent up. Now the brain then will process it, and then it will evaluate it, and then it will send efferent nerve information to the muscles to tell the muscles what to do. When these primary reflexes are not integrated, there's a disconnect there. And what's happening is the brain is sending the wrong information to the muscles, and the body gives the wrong response. And that's how you know a reflex is not integrated. So we're working with the entire circuit, not just with sensory, not just with function. We're working with the nerve pathway of the reflex that's behind both, and that they're working as a team. So you see the bottom, once the information that's sensory is processed and the motor response is correct, you now have a integrated connection between sensory and motor. That's what we're looking for. So that's why it's Masgutova Neurosensorimotor. Next word is reflex. So according to Pavlov, a reflex is a nervous system reaction caused by the stimulation of receptors of the skin, tendons, muscles, mucous membrane, and pupil receptors. Sechenov said that all acts, in other words, everything that we do that is conscious or unconscious, are reflexes by their origin. So what I'm saying is this: if somebody is struggling with function, what is the reflex behind that function? Is the problem the function, or is the problem that the reflex that is there to support the function isn't integrated? So that's what our work is about. Dr. Masgutova defines a reflex as a genetic pattern of physiological function created by nature as a code and a structure ensuring neurosensorimotor development. Okay, now working with the reflexes, you touch an underlying net. Now look at the leaf if you would. It's a net. It's a net that's going to hold the structure of the leaf, but you have to have the network, if you will, to hold what is built upon it. So working with the reflexes, we're going down to the underlying net that serves as an infrastructure of a leaf, or like a building. You have the steel beams go up first, then you put all the other stuff on. But without the steel beams, you have nothing. We are working with the steel beams. We are working with the net that holds the leaf. So a reflex is the informative unit of positive survival and gradual physical, emotional, and cognitive development. So the effect of this work is not only physical, it's also emotional, it's also cognitive. So it affects the whole system because reflexes are foundational for every physical, emotional, and cognitive behavior that we have. So now here's the key word I really want you to understand that's unique about the Masgutova program. We understand Masgutova, we understand neurosensorimotor, we understand reflex. The key word now is integration. Now, integration is not inhibition. We do not inhibit a reflex. Let's take, for example, I don't know if you can see me. Look in the little box where I am. Okay. Okay. So if I am in ATNR and I'm stuck in ATNR, and that can happen for years, by the way. You can be stuck in this for a long time because it doesn't integrate. A child with cerebral palsy can be physically stuck here. So here I am, I'm stuck in ATNR. So somebody comes and says, that reflex is too active. We have to inhibit it. We have to stop that. It's not good. So they inhibit it by turning the head this way. And now this is not so active. It's a little bit more relaxed and everything. But that hasn't done a thing. I'm sorry, but actually, all we have done is put a Band-Aid on a symptom, but not change the cause. The ATNR is still a mess. And actually, the only thing that happened is that we used the opposite reflex to ATNR, which is abdominal, which is a completely different reflex. All that happened was we put them in a different reflex and called that fixing the one that's having trouble. No, you can't. It's not going to work that way. So Dr. Masgutova actually calls that brain cheating, but it's not accomplishing what we're looking for. We're looking for integration of the reflex, not inhibition. As a matter of fact, Vygotsky, quoted, said, infant movements do not disappear. They will not extinguish. They cannot be inhibited. Well, they can be inhibited, but they can't disappear. You don't want them to disappear. They actually continue to work in conjunction with higher nervous formations and yield a part of their function upward to younger and newer centers. Now, I know that's a lot of words, but what he's saying here is so important. Let's look at this. Here's my brain stem. And that's where all my unconditioned reflexes movements come from. and they fire as an infant, and they fire in utero, as a matter of fact, which I'll show you later. And then they fire during birth. They fired in the first, they practice their unconditioned patterns, and they practice and practice and practice until it gets myelinated, and then it can become a conditioned movement that we can then build on. But we're talking about the lowest level. We're talking about the brainstem movements, which are reflexive movements. Now, when you saw in the video the pillars that were there, and then when the pillars didn't develop, we had trouble with the first floor. So my pillar collapsed, and so is the floor going to. So that's going to affect not only the first floor, but it's going to affect the second floor, and it's going to affect the third floor. And then we have this whole structure that doesn't have a good foundation. That is not the problem, it's actually the answer. The answer, you have to make sure that the foundation is complete. So once these reflexes become integrated and mature, they will continue to work, but not as leaders. They will work in conjunction with higher levels of the nervous system. They'll start working with the diencephalon. They'll start working with the cortex, and they'll start taking those movements up to those higher levels. When you go into the diencephalon, for example, you now enter the realm of the emotional body. So if the emotional body is not integrated, that connection of an integrated reflex is not getting sent to the diencephalon. So we have to go back and make sure it's integrated. Let's try it again. And then once that's integrated, now I've got good communication with the emotional body. Now I move up to the cognitive cortex. This lower system will work in conjunction with them, but watch this, look at this. It yields a part of their function. It allows for the function to be controlled by younger and newer centers. That is so profound, okay? So that is why we say integration. You cannot extinguish a reflex. It would be insane to do so, because all of these primary reflexes are about protection and survival. You use them all the time. If you trip, you use a reflex in 0.8 of a second. It is no longer cognitive. The brainstem takes over, says you're in danger. It is bingo right there. You do not want to lose that. The point is, you don't want to get stuck in it, because if you get stuck in a lay cross flexion, which protected you, you're going to walk funny. So you don't want to do that either, okay? So Dr. Masgutova's work is different because she's basing it on people that she calls neurological giants. These are people like Luria, Anakin, Pavlov, Sechenov, Vygotsky, Piaget, Bernstein. So these are very famous Russian neurophysiologists. Some are about neurophysiology and psychology. Some are about concepts of neurophysiological functioning of the reflexes. Some are on motor development. Some are on just movement development. So she had the opportunity to read the work and the study and the scientific research from these geniuses. Now, then she also read a lot about Western science and how we see neurological development, psychological development, neurophysiology, all of these things. So she took all this wisdom from around the world and observation. Now, this woman is a genius, so she does have an eye of observation that is extraordinary. I cannot even define it. When you have the honor of working with her and watching her work, it will just put you in total humble awe. but she can just see things so quickly and see where the challenge is, where the invitation is coming from, how to set up the body to open the door to the development. So from these guys, she got a lot of information about the motors part. And then she got a lot of information about the sensory part. And she said they have to match, because they don't. They frequently do not match. And that is not the problem, it's the solution. So you get them to match, as we had with our triangle, then we can connect them together, that now they understand what their function is for the body, and they're integrated and they're there to serve. So now this is just kind of summarizing again what was in the video. Many times when things are being taught and we're expecting learning, the approach is through the cortex. And so I'll take this to sports. You can read all you want about the game of golf. You can read 20,000 books about the game of golf. Your cortex has it, but your brainstem doesn't know what you need to do yet. So we need to not start at the cortical level, because that it requires the building of the lower levels first. So if you look at, and I'm afraid to touch this because it'll change things, but I did it. Okay. So if we look down here, here's the brainstem. That develops in the first 4 months of life. That has to happen. Now, if that doesn't happen due to illness or genetics or trauma or whatever, that's going to strongly affect what happens next. In an ideal world, these primary reflexes that we're talking about should finish their growth and development by that time. And you'll be hearing me say this a couple times because it's so important. Let's look at a reflex like crawling. And each of them have a time that they should integrate. But crawling reflex, for example, the reflex Bauer crawling, which is crawling on your stomach, should be integrated. The reflex should be integrated by the 4th month. Now, you guys, the function of crawling isn't going to happen for another 2 or 3 months. What did I just say? Now, automatic gait. Automatic gait is a reflex that you stand a baby up, you're holding them at their thorax, and you lean them forward about 30 degrees, and their little legs start going up and down as if they're running. They have such a hoot doing this. And for the kids that didn't get it developed at the right time, sometimes we'll do it, and we have to save it as a reward, because once you get them up and they're running, they won't stop. They run to the end of the table and they turn themselves around and you fall. Okay, we'll go back. And they run and they want to do it again. They're laughing and they're having so much fun, but it's really happening developmentally too late, but it's okay. That doesn't matter. This will take care of the time thing. So the automatic gait, here's a child, literally the feet are going like this. The top of the body is not moving. The arms are not moving, but the feet are running. That is a reflex. That will integrate in 2 months. They will not run for another year or more. What did I just say, you guys? This is very important to understand. Reflex is not function. Reflex is the foundation of function. They are 2 different things, and that's extremely important to understand. So if then from having my brainstem worked with here, then the next step up is working with a diencephalon, the emotional brain, and that will be 4 to 6 months. And the emotional brain begins to develop. And then after 6 months, we now start to develop the cortex. Now, sometimes that can be delayed by months and years. And if it is, we have to start with step number 1. We start with the extrapyramidal nerve system and the lower motor neurons. We start here and then build up. Okay, so that's why we get the results that we do. Our program is focused on restoration and maturation of primary reflexes. And our goal is to build resistance and strengthening of the nervous system and the immune system, stress management and stress resilience, and neuroplasticity. So our mission of the program is to provide reliable knowledge and safe tools for the use of natural genetic sensory motor resources to facilitate and optimize neurosensory motor development, function, stress management, and successful learning. So you've seen this, you know it. Now look at the bottom of this. At the bottom of it are movements called archetype movements. So you have to be able to move before you can do even the reflexes. Some of the kids we work with have 0 to no movement. You know them, you work with them. So what do you do to get that going? We start with archetype. We start with archetype to get the movement system working. Then we go from there and work with reflexes. The reflexes, though, need to be integrated so that then I have a building block to build function and higher level of activity. If any of these are not integrated, it will strongly affect the foundation of function. And then function comes across as clumsy, inefficient, not achieved. And I think this is the thing that Jasmine was talking about. She was trying to get function and frustrated that it wasn't happening, but it can't happen if you don't have the clear foundation under it. So adding this one piece in is going to make your work, oh, so much easier. Do you agree, Jasmine? I loved your smile when you were listening to this
Definitely.
thing. Okay, so let's experience this yourself. Everybody stand up. So I'd like for you to experience reflexes. So standing up, I'd like for you to lean forward and watch what happens when your gravity line gets over your feet. What are your toes doing? Hopefully they're doing this. Hopefully they're doing toe grasp. Now, sometimes they're not, and we'll talk about that, but it should be doing toe grasp to help you keep your balance. So in doing leaning forward, you are actually using foot grasp, toe grasp, foot grasp, sorry. You're also using a reflex called grounding and stability, which is from a class we have called Lifelong. You're also using head riding, and you're also using, do this. Now lean forward a little bit more. If you lean forward more, you should take off and walk. And that's called automatic gait. Boom, 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 boom. Okay, so that's the correct response. Now let's see what happens with the next one. Now I'd like for you to lean backwards. Lean back a little bit more, okay? What is happening to your toes now that your gravity line is back behind your feet? Your toes should be coming up. This is called foot tendon guard reflex. Now, the foot tendon guard is coming up to protect you. A reflex called the balancing reflex, the core flexion reflex that is taught in a class. Balancing is lifelong. Core flexion is taught in a class called neurostructural. Core tendon guard is taught in a class called neurostructural. Head riding is in lifelong. Now, if you lean back a little bit more, be careful. Watch what's behind you, make sure your balance is okay. I assume no responsibility what happens. You are responsible for your own safety here. And just lean back a little bit more and notice that your feet want to move to catch you. That's called a backwards automatic gait, okay? So do you see how natural and effortless these reflexes are? They will happen like that in response to anything that's going on. They know how to protect us. So we've discussed this. Reflexes do not disappear. They want to become integrated. They provide protection in utero. They provide protection during birth and in the first few months of life. Now, reflexes will appear again following brain trauma, brain injury, trauma, or situations of extreme stress. You will see these reflexes, and you'll train your eyes that when you're watching somebody, you can see what reflexes they're using as a compensation. It's compensatory. Anytime after 2, it's the wrong answer. But the body says, I have to protect me, and I will continue to keep my hand here because I have cerebral palsy, but I'm doing this because this is a form of protection. No, it's not. The brain thinks it is, but we just need to retrain the brain. That's not to your highest and best. Okay. So we work with primary sensory motor reflex patterns, which are the key component of human development, especially survival during stress and danger, fundamental neurological building and recovery systems, and we crucially influence the brain function and development. Now, here's some principles of our work. Again, is it okay if simple is profound? I have taught so many classes, and at the end of class, people will come up and say, why didn't I learn this in college? Well, nobody put these reflex circuit as the foundational key. And so we had to wait for Dr. Masgutova to see this and put it together. And it connects the sensory with specific, universally the same motor response patterns. Now, what we do, you guys, we find a key. Let's just say that grasp is really good on one hand, but it's just too weak on the other hand. So this hand that understands how to do grasp is a key. We work on it first. And then this hand, understanding everything about the mechanics of sensory and motor integration, will spill over and will teach the opposite hand. So in other words, we build number 5, we build on the positive rather than fix the negative. And it's amazing how much faster training goes when you find out what works and then bring the brain's attention to what's working. And then it will go, okay, piece of cake, why didn't you say so? Well, I'll show the other side how to do it. And you'll find what you're trying to get across will happen much faster doing that. We also want them to feel safe. So we don't want pain while we're working with them. We want to make sure that there's a sense of security so that we have this foundation for emotional, physical, and mental development. But again, this is awakening innate genetic intelligence. Now, this is a video from a lady who worked with one of our specialists. I'll let you listen to this.
He lives in Clay County and he has autism. His mom was told that he would never speak. Judy Blaylock shows us how his mother defied the doctors.
It's everything. I mean, he's our world. He was completely engaged with us. And our bonds were just extremely, extremely close. You need a jump? He was hitting every milestone, hitting some way before he should. He's sticking your tongue out. When he all of a sudden, was just not there. Say hi, Daddy. It kind of blew our mind.
It's not that Courtney was in denial.
Can you go swim underwater?
Her master's in the child education field. She knew something was wrong.
Once everything's changed, you would say, William, William, William. And not only would he not turn around, not look at you, sometimes it was like he didn't even hear you. My child is 3 years old, and he's sitting right beside me. He will not tell me his future.
William, diagnosed with severe nonverbal autism.
I was told this is what it's going to be like forever.
So Courtney brought in therapists.
I had a team of 5. We were running about 30 hours a week.
2.5 years of home therapy.
He didn't talk. We had nothing. Could you work?
So Courtney did more research and found a therapy called MNRI, Masgutova Neurosensorimotor Reflex Integration. Long name. But how far has he come?
Oh, he's now, it's It's amazing.
From not engaging, from saying nothing to, well, listen.
Where do you want to go in September of 2020?
On vacation.
To where?
On a cruise ship.
On a cruise ship?
And on Disney.
But Mom got the year wrong.
August 2021.
Oh, Mommy was off of the year. So when people are like, oh, he just grew out of it, they don't grow out of it. It's a lifelong diagnosis.
And it goes much deeper than fun chatter. The day we met William, the rest of his friends were at the Clay County Fair. And when he figured that out, he got so upset right in the middle of therapy. But listen carefully.
This is a terrible sad. Terrible.
Oh my goodness.
How big a deal was that just now?
Huge. Huge. It's huge for him to be able to say, this is how I'm feeling. Because in the past, he could just start screaming and crying and you wouldn't know what it was. Too high? Yes or no?
To Mom, it means finally understanding her own son. His thoughts, his emotions trapped inside.
And it's taken hundreds of thousands of dollars. And me and my husband sacrificing everything. And some of our family sacrificing to get him where he is.
But what is MNRI? Devin Ewart is an occupational therapist in St. Augustine, trained in MNRI. 21 years she's worked with children with autism.
And though they look totally inpatient and like they're all over the place, try to live a day in that life where everybody's trying to direct you and you have these thoughts and feelings and you know what you want to say, only you can't.
You can't because your neurological pathways are not developed properly. So MNRI focuses on what's called primitive reflexes. For example,
Spinal volant is a very early reflex.
they are reflexes crucial to developmental milestones. It is a complex science, but basically it's therapy directed at the brain stem to retrain the brain with sensory stimulation.
Actually rewiring things. You're rewiring those reflexes to actually go back and create those pathways.
It's okay, Mom.
So that speech can come naturally.
An oceanside when you'll speak on the beach.
So that a mom and her son
I
know.
can exchange the most important words of our lives. I love you. I know, that's pretty cool, isn't it? Now, I reached out to Michelle Dunham, Executive Director of JSA, the Jacksonville School of Autism, and I asked her about MNRI. She says it's something gaining momentum in the autism community. In fact, parents can be trained to work on the therapy at home. There is an MNRI training facility in Orlando.
Okay. So the thing is, these reflexes do begin in utero, as we know, but Dr. Masgutova has a video and she's so fun watching this video of in utero movements, and she'll see a movement, she'll say, there, do you see it? Do you see it? There's leg cross flexion extension. I don't think that most people that are looking at these films are seeing the reflexes the way she does. The one in the center is trunk extension, and then here the eyes are beginning to track back and forth. And so these are reflexes that start in utero, and then they will go from there. At 12 weeks, you'll notice stretching, kicking, and jumping. 18 weeks, you'll notice yawning. 26 weeks, you'll notice scratching and smiling and crying and sucking and hiccuping. Now, this is an amazing story. This is a story about a young man who was going to have surgery for spinal bifida. And so it had to be while he was still in utero. So they did the surgery, and I'm trying to think, I have, just a second here. Grasp. I have the, here it is. Look, oh no. Okay, hands grasp. The story is during the procedure, the doctor removes the uterus via C-section and makes a small incision to operate on the baby. He completed the surgery on Samuel. The little guy reached his tiny but fully developed hands through the incision and firmly grasped the surgeon's finger. The tiny hand emerged from the baby's uterus, mother's uterus, in order to do this. Samuel was born in perfect health. The operation was 100% successful. My response is the surgeon is still recovering. I mean, what? Really? Can you imagine a little tiny hand like that coming out to say thank you? But that's how active these reflexes are in uterus as well. Okay. So here we go. Ba-boom, ba-boom. Okay, let's look at a few primary reflexes. These are the ones that we teach. This is the sagittal plane, right and left sides of the body. And it's just sequentials, hand, opening, closing, leg cross flexion, bonding, Babinski, foot grasp, Robinson grasp, asymmetrical. These are based on movement of side to side. Then another category that we have for motor coordination systems is upper and lower parts of the body, which is going to be using Thomas automatic gait, Bauer crawling, Morrow, Landau, Pavlov, hand supporting. Again, hand supporting shows up here. Leg cross flexion again shows up because it's not only side to side, it's also up and down. So this is another group. Then our last is the dorsal plane, which is a front and back motor coordination system, will be trunk extension, STNR, spinal galant, spinal Perez, and so these are the basic reflexes that we teach and learn how to screen to see if they need work, and then how to work on them to get that pillar built so that they will give support as they're intended. Now, the people that we work with give us an issue. That's it. We don't care. Everything has a nervous system under it, so it impacts everything. So here's the list. Just glance at it. Not on the list is also sports. We also work with sports enhancement. We had a gentleman from Slovenia who was a snowboarder, and he was going to go into the Olympics in Russia a few years back. And he worked with Dr. Masgutova for a few days in Poland. And his report that he wrote afterwards was that his body, mind, and heart learned more in those few days with her in terms of recovery from trauma and injuries and these sorts of things than he had been able to accomplish in a couple years. So he was real thrilled. He ended up being 6th in the world. He would have probably gotten a medal, but his equipment broke. So it's hard to win gold when your equipment doesn't work. But we work with everybody. Now, you guys, there is a video that is on the YouTube. We'll send you the link for this. This is a combination of different parents from this vast menu, if you will, of symptoms, and their stories of how the work has helped them. We won't watch the whole thing. I'll just put it on for a bit of it, and then you can know that you can go watch the rest of it on YouTube. But I just want you to get feedback from parents who have been using this work. Okay, so here we go.
What if I told you I knew how to help your child with autism? That I knew how to improve their socialization, speech, cognitive processes, and physical agility, starting today? Would you be interested? What if I told you that a child who's been blind since birth may have a chance at a life with vision, or that your little boy with cerebral palsy may run one day? Would you want to know how? What if I told you I knew how to improve health and well-being across the board? What if I told you I found the missing link? can see those black clouds rolling in, feel the fear creeping into my heart again. Sometimes life's like a ruthless fight. You can never.
Sydney was born with a tumor on her spine, and she had it removed when she was 9 days old. And after that, she went through chemotherapy, and she was paralyzed from the waist down.
So when she was 12 weeks old, we finally had an MRI and an EEG and realized that she was having seizures and that she had global brain damage.
Most of the brain damage for him is in the occipital lobe. It's mainly cortical. Very little of the gray matter was affected, but he was totally unresponsive.
Mia was born 29 weeks gestation, weighing 1 pound, 4 ounces. She was severely intrauterine growth restricted.
My daughter Natalie was born with cerebral palsy and arthrogryposis. Her knees were frozen up, her hips were out of joint, so it impacts every joint and tendon really that she has in her body.
Specialist puts Parker on the table, checks a couple of quick reflexes and says, has anybody talked to you guys about cerebral palsy? And our heads kind of spun around on our necks 360 degrees, and we went, what do you mean cerebral palsy? Cerebral palsy is those kids that are like this and they're bound up and they're in their wheelchair and they can't talk, and my little boy doesn't have cerebral palsy.
Start seeing signs that she was not verbal from the time she was like 13 months.
My son was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome when he was 8, and my daughter has seizures.
At about 2.5 years old, he was diagnosed with autism, as well as having seizures.
And then finally, we got a diagnosis of autism. And I heard autism. I had no clue what autism was.
It was pretty dark for a while, for years, because what the doctors were saying is, one, we don't understand what this is. We don't know what the seizures are about. We'll try and control them with medication, but the medication just absolutely, he was out of it. So there was he was even less with us. Wow, that was a hard time.
After he started to present with seizures, they gave him the phenobarbital and all these really hardcore drugs, basically not doing anything. The EEGs were really flat, and she basically told me he may not even breathe on his own. This may be it.
And they said, this is a very, very small baby. We have a huge problem here. We don't know if she's gonna make it. Like, this is not good.
We were told by doctors to expect her to be in a wheelchair, and she underwent lots of surgeries and casts until she was almost a year old.
The doctors told us Parker's probably not going to be a candidate for independent walking. We'll get him on his feet, we'll get him weight bearing, but just be prepared for the fact that he's probably always going to use some sort of adaptive device. So we thought, okay, well, I guess that's what we have to look forward to, is a bunch of limitations.
My son was 16. He was very profoundly depressed. He was on the floor crying. That's with meds, on anxiety meds. There was nothing we could do, ever. We tried everything that the medical community had for us.
Before the camp, Akhil would have a lot of anxiety behaviors, transition behaviors. If there is too much talking in the bus, he would have a tantrum. They would have to pull the van aside. They had to call us and we had to talk to him. I had a lot of marks on my hand, aggressing towards people, not able to handle himself.
Remember that lady. Remember that lady and her son.
Your daughter will never talk. Your daughter will be in an institution. And for me, it was really heartbreaking. And I felt like, okay, how can a person who's 50, 60 years old have cancer and they tell them there is hope, and my daughter is just 2 and you tell me this is what she's going to get. So that was really a tough one. But I guess, for me it was a motivation because I just didn't want to listen to her. I said, I think that it's other way.
They told him he wasn't going to walk independently. 18 months of work with the MNRI group, Parker took off walking. Now that we've been doing the MNRI program for about 5 years, Parker runs track, Parker plays football, he loves playing tag with his friends. So any of those things that they told us were not going to be possible, clearly are possible. And the list of no's doesn't even exist anymore. We don't know any limitations. This kid's going to go through the roof.
Before she turned a year old, we met Shannon. and started MNRI therapy. Since then, she has learned to walk and run and dance and play and live life outside of a wheelchair.
Almost miraculously, she started swallowing the baby food puree. So we went from 0% eating by mouth to about 2-3 tablespoons within those first 3 weeks of starting the therapy. And then now we are a year and some change out, and she's 100% fed by mouth.
You know, the first one in January and then in March. And that was the first time I had ever seen him visually track anything other than a light. He's looking at you. He's looking at you. I'll never forget it, but he looked at her face, and when she backed away, he followed her. And there was no denying that that was what was happening. And so she went to the other side of the table and got over him and then moved, and he followed her again. Again, like the waterworks.
She's made huge strides in the swallowing and the breathing, and the coordination of suck, swallow, breathe. She's made a lot of strides in her trunk control and head control in general. And then vision. We've seen a lot of changes positively in her vision. So she was diagnosed blind when she was 4 months old. And we brought her to another doctor because we said we want a second opinion. We don't believe it. And they said, yeah, we think that she's blind. Brain damage is tough and cerebral palsy is tough. But the vision part was really, really hard for my husband and I. So it's really nice that we know that she can see us, make eye contact, smile. She knows the difference between mommy and daddy and big brother now. And it's a big thing because you need those little rewards.
Before the conference, his left side, which is his weaker side, was a lot shorter than his right side. Whenever he does physical therapy, he needed the heel lift, like this much. But now it's both of the legs are even, it's metric, so he doesn't need a heel lift anymore, which is great.
His feet grew 4 shoe sizes in 6 months after the first camp because we worked on the foot tendon guard. His feet were hard, and now they're soft, like they're becoming flexible. So I think every day that he walks, it's less stress.
This is his third conference, and how many inches did you grow?
5.
5 inches in this past year. But for him, it's muscle mass, it's increase in muscle fibers, as well as the height. Like everything grows along with it. And no doctors knew what to do for that. They just had to feed him more.
He would just get really congested and start sneezing and coughing, and now he can be in environments. I think his immune system, his nervous system, his autonomic nervous system.
So his textural issues have disappeared. His seasonal allergies have disappeared.
The MNRI method wired her, gave her foundation, like wired her genetics so that her genetic path could take over. She didn't skip a beat in development. I mean, I hear from other preemie moms and even regular moms that she's just completely advanced, more advanced than they expect her to be.
I've seen kids who can't walk and run. I've seen other kids like Ian who are screaming down the halls and can't let anyone touch them. By the end of the camp, they are allowing the therapies happen. I see it all the time in every camp.
You'll be getting so big. Oh.
It's only 140 pounds, Svetlana.
I have no strength now to bring you on
His articulation has improved since MNRI, because he did speech therapy for like 10 years. 10 years, and because he didn't talk like till he was 7.5, and then it's like the last 1.5 years of MNRI, the articulation errors just kind of went away on its own.
From being a child that didn't have any words to right now she's on a private school, dance, which is tap dancing and jazz. She's very gifted in piano. She plays things that, 18-year-old cannot even play.
School saw a huge improvement. A boy who was typing at this level, which you saw him typing independently, he was in school at this level.
She's got just this year, she just had a best friend, which has been like a new thing. Everybody wants to be her friend, but she doesn't feel comfortable to be social. And this is the first time she really had a friend that she's really comfortable with.
Now go to the park. He's now able to play with a bunch of other kids that he's never met before, which is amazing.
He would never accept friendship because he didn't feel that he was worthy of a friend. That was gone. So it's more than just a physical thing that this reflex therapy does. It also helps in how they
perceive themselves and what they feel they can do, and then eventually what they can do.
I'm still in awe. He's been braver and stronger.
And first year of her life, she cried nonstop, just never stopped crying. And so for her to be so happy and so funny and such a great, silly personality is really nice.
He had surgery 1 week before, and we decided to come kind of reluctantly. Wasn't sure if he would be okay during that. His nervous system was so out of whack from the surgery. His eyes were jumping around. He was hypersensitive to everything. And within 2 days, his whole nervous system has changed in 2 days, not just the entire camp, but just 2 days. His eyes are straight, they're steady. He's sleeping well. I'm so grateful we came. So
we've had now further progress with my daughter's spine, which is pretty scary, especially when she first started coming here. But she's just getting more symmetry. The spine's getting straighter. Her torso is getting longer.
Immediately after leaving Orlando, we noticed some dramatic changes with Scott, particularly with his spine, his speech.
After the last one, we did in Orlando. My hips are good now.
Bladder and bowel control, we've conquered.
And he too similarly tried everything, it seemed like before, except nothing, and was in the processing speed of 7th percentile. Austin is the poster child for MNRI. He had a neuropsych, a WISC-4, from 4 months prior to when he ever came upon Svetlana Masgutova. 24 months, he has gone from a 107 to a 140.
That's it.
Okay, now you can see it?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Will, for pointing that out. So you all can see the hand here now, correct? Okay, sensory stimulus is right there on the hand when you're checking the reflex for the hand. Now, if the thumb is here, that's a basic pattern, but it also is an integrated hands grasp. If the thumb is inside, that is not integrated. This is indicating a high level of adrenaline and cortisol. It's a reflex that children were used right after birth because they've just been through this horrendous physical thing, but they got a lot of adrenaline, a lot of cortisol. My daughter had an internally infected chickenpox when she was 3 years old. She ended up in the hospital at death's door from a huge infection. And for the rest of her career, till I figured out what to do, she would sit down at the table and put her hand like this, put her thumb in here, and then she'd sit there and eat like this, which meant she was under stress. Now, I didn't know Dr. Masgutova's work, but I knew it was wrong. And so I'd dig her thumb out and I'd say, no, darling, no, we're not going to eat that way. Get your thumb out. And so, but I didn't know how to correct it. Now I know how to correct it. But you'll see that this happen. And if you see it in somebody that you're talking to, treat them kindly because they're under a lot of stress, okay? So there's an entire class just on hands. There's an entire class just on the developmental sequence of the development of patterns that happen with fingers, and it goes into each one, how to integrate each one. As OTs, I would imagine you'd be very interested in that, because what we're working on is, let me just see here, boom, okay. Can you see it? I changed it. You can see it? Okay. So you now see kids writing, correct? Okay. So this is what you're working with. When you see these crazy handwriting postures, these are all telling you, yes, the function is incorrect, but more importantly, the reflex behind the function is incorrect. So you need to backwards and go back to the basics and work with the I mean, this one's classic. That is chuck loaded with compensations. And oh my God, the shoulder and the elbow, the arm, oh my Lord. He's going to have carpal tunnel and all kinds of shoulder problems. But this is just because his grasp reflex is not integrated. So when you see these signs, please go back to basics and get the basics and build that pillar so that then the function of writing has the correct support. So now there are ways to measure the levels of integration of different reflexes. So if this is Dr. Masgutova's measurement that she's come up with, if a reflex is around 16 to 17 on this scale, then it's normal. And by the way, normal is going down now. It used to be at least 16, 17, or 18. 18 means it's very mature and it's at a higher than average. And 20 and above is an Olympian functioning at an extremely high level of integration. But most average kids and people are working in this ballpark here. Now the kids that we work with are down in here. So they start here, but you work them up, and slowly by slowly their scores will get higher, and that means the integration is higher. So here is reflex screening on an infant. This is Isabel Fontaine, who is a core specialist. She's a physical therapist who works in the NICU in a hospital. So these fortunate babies have put themselves in her hands, which is the best place on the planet to be. And so here she's going to show what happens. So she's doing the Babinski there. Oh. So she's looking for the foot response that happens. That's Babinski. She's looking for Babinski.
Left, not as, do you see? It's not as. Okay. Okay.
Okay, let's see what happens here. Now she's on the inside of the foot. Now she's looking for foot tendon guard. And that was a very good response on one side. So that one is a little bit slower to come. It's not as clean, but she eventually gets there. But now if you were to have seen this, let's do this again. There is a perfect foot tendon guard. That being the case, which foot, oh darn it, sorry. I wanted to stop it. Which foot would you work with first? Seeing that clean, correct motor response on the right side. Now let's compare that with the left side. My computer is so touchy. Okay, sweetheart, I went there. Okay, go. Now watch, that's perfect. So on the inside of the foot is a sensory stimulus. There the response doesn't happen immediately, so that's slower on that side. Now it's starting to happen, but it's still not as clean and crisp of a response. So you would work foot tendon guard on the right side first, and then eventually come to the left side, which it will learn a ton faster because the mechanics of how to do it have been wired in the brain. On one side, it will spill over to the other side and help it to do the same. Okay, now this is Babkin Palmamental. So notice how the baby turns its head towards the hand that she's pushing.
If we do both.
Now she's going to push both. And now the mouth opens in the center.
So good.
Okay, so with Babinski, what happens is if you push on this side, not Babinski, for heaven's sakes, that's on the foot. I know the difference. I'm sorry. Babkin Palmamental. So Jasmine is sitting there smiling, going, she'll get it. Okay, so here is Babkin Palmamental. You push here, the head will turn in that direction. and you push on this side, the head will turn in this direction. You push on both, the head will open up this way. It is a hand-mouth reflex, and it's connected with searching for nourishment and food. So Isabel was just showing that. Okay. So now let's just look at neuroplasticity and the development. So in a newborn, there's a few axons and a few things developing. Oh my goodness sakes. Okay. Yeah, but let me come up here quietly so I can sneak it. And at 1 month, this is developing a little bit more, 3 months more. The net. This is the neural net that's developing. Okay. So there's just so much information passed through these axons and through these synapsical connections. And so at birth, each neuron starts off with 2,500 connections. At the age of 2, 3, they're going to have 15,000 connections. So the nervous system is quite complex. Now, what happens is, as these pathways get activated, they're slight. It's some connection and the brain is starting to get it. But then you repeat it over and over and over again, then it gets broader, then it gets more clear, and finally it becomes a real path, and now it becomes a road, and now it becomes a highway, now it becomes a super highway. And if you want to get to the airport, boom, you go on that. You're right there immediately. So that's what we're doing, is that we're building these neurological pathways. Now here's something that's real important. This requires a synaptical jump, the action potential. This is called action potential. And so this action potential requires for this neurological chemical impulse to be transferred from one axon to the next, and that should move quickly. However, you guys, if it's not developed, or mostly this destruction here and the slow movement is usually due to a destruction of the myelinization. The myelinization is critical for the transference of this data, and adrenaline and cortisol is our worst enemy in terms of acting against that myelinization and eating it, if you will. So there was a child that when I very first conference I went to in Poland in 2003, there was a child there who did not myelinate well. And the doctor said that she would have 6 months to live max. And we started working with her and working with the nervous system. And what happened is it activated the information of the hormonal system, the chemicals, the firing, and she lived several years. I don't know what her status is now, but she was only supposed to live 6 months. And when I worked with her 2 years later, she was quite vibrant, learning how to do functions and everything. Okay, so now let's look at ATNR. So ATNR, as I showed you, is one hand is going out and the hand looks in the same direction. The other hand is going to bend. So these are twins, and one of them is doing an ATNR because his head turned. The stimulus for ATNR is you turn the head and the hand will go like that, okay? And so here's this baby turning his head and going like that. Adorable. Same thing with the other set of twins. It's a neurological demand of the body that when that stimulus is activated, this is a motor response that we must see. So now, the opposite of that though, when I was saying that here we have an ATNR that's stuck and I want to unstick it, so I'm going to just activate the abdominal, and now this is not so strong and active. You haven't changed ATNR, it's still a mess. You've just simply activated the opposing reflex, and so you haven't dealt with the issue. And so inhibition is not what we want. We want the reflex to work and integrate. So the opposite of ATNR is, here's ATNR, the baby's head is turned, the arm is straight. ATNR is about learning to listen it's very strong in terms of the development of the auditory system and the visual system eventually. And then the opposite is abdominal. And now the baby's head is turned towards the bent arm and he's asleep. And see, the leg is bent, the arm is bent, sound asleep. It's about sleeping. Here's the thing that's so fun. ATNR is about waking up. ATNR is about listening, hearing, seeing, and being aware of what's going on. Ah, now I can hear. Now I can see. Oops, I can't hear or see. I guess I'll go to sleep. Is that hilarious or what? That's how we're wired. I love it. I just love it. Okay, so now let's look at this in terms of its chronological development. It will start in utero around the 12th week, and it develops, and then it will reach a transition period. And we study all this in depth in our class called Dynamic and Postural Reflex Integration. And it goes through a transition, and then it goes to what are called variant patterns, which means, for example, with grasp, this is the foundation basic. Transition is going to look like this. And then to do variant patterns, I can then do things like one finger at a time. So it's more complex as we go along. But you want to have this integrated first to support the transition and to support the higher level functioning of the hand, of the reflex, which is connected with the hand. Now, this, let me just pull up the info on this. Hold on 1 second, bear with me. Here we go. Okay, this is again, this is Isabel, who is our physical therapist. She's a core specialist and an instructor for us. She's working now with a child who had an amniotic sac rupture, and it creates a strand that will come out and wrap around a limb, and then it will contract, and it can suffocate the limb. So this is a very rare thing. You'll find it in one in 1,200 to even 1 in 15,000 live births. It's very rare. Now the strands of, what happens is the strands of the inner membrane of the embryonic sac will come out. They kind of rupture and they tear, and then you have this thread that's floating around inside the uterus, okay? Then it becomes entangled with digits, with limbs, or anything, but it's called a constriction band, and it can get very tight. It's like a rubber band that you put around here, but it's a real small rubber band, and then as you grow, it gets even smaller and smaller. So it's uncertain, and it's considered an accidental chance that it will happen. It doesn't appear to be genetic or hereditary, so the likelihood of it occurring in another pregnancy is low. Now, let me just explain to you what happened with this case. Per an assessment by an occupational therapist, there was no right triceps activity. There was no right biceps activity, nothing. There was no successful active response elicited in the right arm after a couple weeks of traditional occupational therapy approach. So she was referred to an MNRI trained PT by the OT at 10 weeks because they got no function, no movement of this arm. It was essentially a dead arm, and the doctors were ready to amputate it and take the arm off. Everybody said the arm is dead, nothing can be done. So then there was an atypical posture of the right arm in abduction. The elbow was hyperextensive majority of the time throughout the first 10 weeks of the infant's life. So this is the first time that Isabel had a chance to work with this baby. She watches, she assesses what is going on. And she sees that the answer, this is not the problem, but this is the answer. ATNR is the answer. So she just watched the baby. She saw what was missing is this arm is trying to move, but it can't. If we activate ATNR, let's watch and see what happens. So again, this is the first time. Okay, come on, come on, come on. Nope, 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 nope. You're going to love this next one too, but I need to get this one going. No. Oh, for heaven's sakes. I click on that. Oh, there we go.
Yeah, yes.
Hi. Are you showing us how you move your arm? Yeah, you can lift it all the way there. Yay. You can bring it all the way up. Look at it. Yeah. Oh, how we got to bend it. Okay. Now, what if we
So she's going to pull the arm and the leg. She's making the leg and the arm straight. Do you see right there? That arm went right across midline for the first time. So Isabel saw that that worked. So she's going to make it more interesting by adding vision and auditory, which will help this reflex to integrate even more. So she's pulling the arm and the leg. And there goes that arm. It's starting to move. So she's using the sensory stimulus to get this reflex to work in it, as it should. So we should have some movement from the opposite arm. See how the child is interested in the colors? She's looking over there because she's interested in that. Okay, now we've lost the object of interest, so she gets a little bored. So we're going to bring back in auditory and visual. Now she's going to do hands pulling with her. And hands pulling, her arms should lock so that she sets up. So Isabel's starting to teach her brain what that arm can do and is supposed to do. And now she's bringing in hand, mouth.
One more time. Go. Here we go.
We're watching that hand. There it goes. There it goes. She's like she's almost reaching over there. Okay. So I wish I had the other pictures, but what happened? This little girl now is probably, I'm going to say 3 or 4. She has full functioning of her hand and arm now. She crawled with it. She eats with it. She puts on boots using both hands. So her functions are phenomenal with this arm that they had wanted to cut off. And she even in crawling, she at first would just crawl on her knuckles, but then she learned to put her hand flat and use a hand supporting so that she could use the arm to support her. And I have to tell you guys, this is so adorable. I wish I had this picture, but the day that she discovered one day she reached for that toy with this hand. She saw it and she reached for it. It was a purposeful, intentional movement, and it was so adorable. And then the next thing that was a real trademark response was that her hand was here and it was just kind of doing its thing. And all of a sudden she stops and she looks at it and she realizes that's her hand, and she looks at it. That's a hand. That's my hand. What is it? Oh, adorable. So her whole journey has been we've got videos of it. It's just remarkable. But I want you to see what can happen if you take ATNR and integrate it. I know my friend once had a stroke, and they were trying to get her to turn her head, and they kept just turning her head. So I just took her arm and pulled her arm, and then her head turned automatically. So see, you use the reflexes to make the function that you want to work faster, because you're working from the basics of reflexes. Okay, now this is extraordinary. Oh boy, how are we doing on time? But yeah, you want to see this. I think this is only about 6 minutes. This is a lady who took a class in tactile that we have. And so she studies spines. So she measured this guy's spine at the beginning. This is at the end. And then she also measures pressure on the foot. And so she has some machinery that is, I think she's one of 4 people in the world that has this stuff. She took tactile, she took dynamic and postural online. She took tactile integration online. And when I was teaching tactile, I kept telling her, now, if you want to do the whole program, it will take 2 hours because it's very intensive, but save that for special occasions. I've really only done the 2-hour session with maybe 4 people, 5 people, because it's so time consuming. But whatever you do, be present. Whatever you do, do it with care and presence and complete connection with them. And that's what she did. She finished the class. 2 weeks later, she works on this man. And I want you to see what happened just with working with our tactile integration. I was a little bit blown away by her report personally, but now where are you, sweetie? Where are you?
So I had occasion to use what I had learned a few weeks ago on neurotactile integration, part 1 and part 2, a full 2-hour session. So this was the measurement before we started. This red line here is picking up the spinous process on the back. And so when the red line is on the right, it means the vertebra rotated left and vice versa. So we have a strong left rotation of the T-spine, bar the very bottom, bar really the thoracolumbar junction area, and then a strong left rotation in the lower L-spine. The left shoulder is elevated, and is habitually elevated in this person. The blue is pure concave, the red is pure convex, and green is saddle, everything in between. So we can see a very strong 50 degrees of lumbar lordosis, and a pelvis that sits 58 millimeters ahead of the apex of the ribcage curve, and ideally the pelvis is underneath the ribcage so that the body supports itself skeletally. And he looks like he's standing in his left hip, but actually he's standing square in both feet. And we can see that there's a 9-degree tilt at T2 and a 9-degree tilt at L4, making a very strong left lateral flexion, which reduces to 2 degrees at T1 and 2 degrees at T11 after several hours of neurotactile integration with a tiny bit of scar tissue release on the very old appendectomy scar. Reduction of the forward pelvis from 58 millimeters to 31 millimeters, which is just about half, and a reduction of the lordotic curve from the 50 degrees to a much more normal, much more average 35. Absolutely amazing. And we can now see that there's hardly any rotation in the spine at all. Just a little bit in the lumbar spine. The spine you can see is completely straight. You can see the symmetry through the spine, and this is stabilometry, so postural sway. So the central nervous system doesn't know quite what to do with this new information. He's just standing still, but everything is more organized, more symmetrical, straighter. And because it was so extraordinary, I wasn't expecting anything. It was just not an experiment, but I just thought, well, we'll measure after a 2-hour session just to see what it does. And if we overlay, it's very easy to see the difference, the better sagittal plane alignment of the spine, the straightness of the spine, and the lack of rotation. The red is the after. So just thought I'd share here. He said it was fine for me to share to show you that this happened. It is long, 2 hours of hands-on. He enjoyed it. I enjoyed doing it because as the practitioner, you are moving a lot as you sweep along each limb. But I just thought this might be interesting for everybody.
She did a follow-up with him several months later, and the correction has held. So that's good to know. I have done tactile for years, and I have never considered the spine and changes to it. So what she found was really remarkable, very, very remarkable. She's done similar things on other reflexes. She did one on the ATNR, one on spinal gallant, and one on scoliosis. And I believe that this is a girl that had 40-degree scoliosis, and then she did a full ATNR and spinal gallant, and it started like this, and it ended with a huge change there. So it reduced by 28%, and that was just working only with the reflexes of ATNR and spinal gallant. So we have a lecture. We have a group called the Minds Group, and Will is going to send this letter out tomorrow. Will, let's send it out tomorrow because I'd like to put the name of this specific lecture for them to get. There's a lecture where we go into the information about each reflex, and then Helen gives about 6 reports like this, and she shows how she worked with the kids and stuff. So if you're interested in seeing that lecture, we'll send you a link for that specific lecture in our store. It was a fantastic lecture. I was so thrilled to hear what Helen has found. So, so you too can learn how to recognize, to screen, and to integrate reflexes. And so what we would like to do is invite you. Some of our classes are becoming real time. Most of them are still online. But as you saw, Helen, who had 2 classes online, and that's all, was getting pretty good results. I don't know who this woman is. She's amazing. So here's some good classes to take. Dynamic and postural is a really good one for a basic class. And that's the one where we look at about 21 reflexes and how to screen them, how to educate them, integrate them. Neurotactile is the class that this lady was using that created this difference for the first man she worked with in his spine. And then Archetype is a class that works with the movement that's at the foundation of everything. So again, if you're working with a child who has extreme low tone of muscles and no movement, you want to start with Archetype. But if you're just working on function, this is really good for emotional. It's really good for the brain, because when you work with the skin, you're actually working with the brain and the nervous system, because they came developmentally from the same place. This one is a must. This one is full of reflexes, and we show you what problems are caused by these reflexes being not integrated, and you would know based on what you're working with which reflex to pick. Okay, that's it. Wow. Whew. Ha. We did it. We did it. Okay, so you can go to our website, and all the classes are listed. So once you come here, just click View All. You'll be able to see all the classes and what's available. Okay, so we also have the graduate school, and that just opened and started. And so that is a wonderful thing to also look at their website and see what they're doing. Also, our school is growing. So if you want to donate to the school or to research, you're welcome to do that. Just go to the Masgutova Foundation website. And there's a little heart there. Just click on that. And so we appreciate your participation. And we also have, oh, there was another slide there that showed the Masgutova website, the Masgutova method website. Go to that. And that's where you'll find the classes. And then go to the store. And that's where you'll see all of the lectures that have been done by the Minds group. They're just beautiful, very profound lectures, but we will point out this one for sure. Okay, now I'm done. Ah, that was easy. Now, Will, it's 12 o'clock at night for Will.
Yeah, that's okay. I still have 5 minutes. No.
Okay.
No,
Okay.
Pamela, you could go to the questions of 3:15 p.m. There are a lot of questions, and you just pick them
Okay.
if you can answer some of them.
Okay.
Jen was the one. Let me see.
Do you want me to read them out to you?
Yeah, that would be great. Let's do that.
Okay. Dunja asked, how much time do you need to do integrations before on a reflex before it integrates?
It's different for every person. Sometimes it's done one time, and that's if somebody's neurotypical and they just had an accident and you need to reboot and reset and remind the body of the reflex. They can get it with one time. When I'm working with a child with developmental delays, it can take months and years, but it does work. It does work. So you just keep going.
Okay. Jennifer asked about more studies. I think there are some on the MNRI website.
Oh, thank you. The research. Oh, thank you for that question. Okay, you guys, when you go to the Masgutova, and Will, let's add this to the list of a link for scientific studies. So we'll give you a link to go to our scientific studies. I really encourage you to look at one on neurotransmitters. We did a 2-year research on neurotransmitters. We studied 11 neurotransmitters, GABA, dopamine, those guys, and to see the effect before and after our work. What I will just tell you in a very generic way to explain what happened, the lab and the doctor who was evaluating the results and looking at the beginning and after the work, they both called us and said, "Who are you guys? What are you doing?" They both said, "This is impossible. We have never seen changes in neurotransmitters this fast. We have never seen them done without medications and drugs. You have made changes within an unbelievable short amount of time, and the body created itself. What are you doing?" They were both awestruck. The research is phenomenal. So look at that research. It is external research. And so look for neurotransmitters for sure. Will write that down or maybe even find that research. So there's lots of research done.
Yeah, perfect.
Oh, yeah, good. Oh, and if you're interested, I would love to set up another lecture where Dr. Masgutova comes and goes into depth on this scientific research. She adores science, and she will just give you data and explanation and stories that will just warm your mind and heart. So, Jasmine, we'll look into that.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Coming up next. Yeah. And then just, I really don't want to, I'll try to get through as many questions as possible. I know that we're running actually right on time, like at the end of our time now.
To leave, please do. We'll go 10 more minutes, that's it.
Okay. And then we had a question about, is there a sensory spot you'll have to touch with ATNR and STNR? And also some people that are saying that they have different situations of working with ATNR with their kids that may not have the attention for, or not have the attention, but allow the touch part of that.
Yeah, and that's why you want to work with tactile, because you have to be able to touch. So we work with a tactile system first, get it calmed down so we can do touch. So there's a way, but when you come and you watch us work and you do clinical training with us, you see how we work with kids that are untouchable. but they eventually get it, as a boy who is going into college now, as a boy who performed a piano concert. But ATNR and STNR, their sensory stimulus is a movement of the head and neck. It's not a point you touch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you know, for a few people here that don't know, I think a lot of you on here are, because on a Facebook group, there was a question of like, how do you work on ATNR and STNR? And a bunch of ideas came out of that. And a lot of people were like talking about things, and that's how this conversation got started and this whole event got started. So that's why I asked Pamela to talk about the ATNR a little bit more in depth. So there's a lot more steps to go into ATNR before you actually just jump into it. But that's one of the reasons why this talk had a lot of talk about ATNR. But you might not need, might not want to just jump straight into that depending on the case that you're in.
I want to get training of how to do it efficiently. Yeah.
But and then we had some talk about working on reflexes, helping with eating processing speed.
Yeah, we answered that. Let's go to the next
and
one.
then let's see. Jacob asked if it's better to stay on NG tube or switch to PEG for learning, swallowing, and sucking reflex. He has a 17-month-old boy after TBI, HBI, brainstem atrophy. He can eat up to 20 milliliters of puree from spoon by wiping the spoon.
So let's do this. What you want to do is take the class on orofacial. You need to get the reflexes integrated first. Leave them on the NG tube for sure now. You don't want to give them food till they know how to work the mechanics of all of this. This has to be integrated and ready to do its job. That is not accomplished by saying swallow. It is accomplished by showing the body how to do it, and then it will be fine. But that takes that training. So focus on the reflexes, and that's the class.
Yeah, and I've found that one of my parents that I work with is on here, and her kid is eating faster. We haven't even been working the oral reflexes.
Yeah. Sometimes
the other stuff, and she's like,
I've seen
he's eating at the right pace now. So there's some other things that we can talk about.
I know. All the reflexes are fun, really.
And then let's see, that's a really big one. Let's see, and then also just reviewing, why is it important to work the side that is doing well? Holly asked about that versus not doing well.
The reason you want to do that is because the side that's doing it well understands the mechanics. So here's the thing, you guys. The way that we work with this is that we give a sensory stimulus and then we show the body the correct motor response, because it doesn't know how. If it knew how, it would do it. It doesn't know how. That's not the problem, it's the answer. You show it how. So we spend a lot of time slowing down in slow motion. We add proprioception. So once proprioception is there and slow motion, that we hold the correct motor pattern for at least a minimum of 7 seconds, sometimes 21 seconds, the brain goes, oh, you wanted me to do that movement. Why didn't you say so? Well, actually, I am right now. I am saying so. And so the body gets it. Now, the side that gets it first understands, and the brain is understanding the pathways. This side then will teach the other side how to do the same thing. It's called, I think it's called transference, and it has names, spillover. But it will learn faster because half of your body got it.
Yeah. And then I think I could just easily answer this one. Is just the video was just an example of a few different reflexes. Some people were like, oh, how come Moro wasn't on there? It's just, it was just an example of a few, right? So it is a fundamental reflex to work on.
Yeah, and Helen has just started this project, so she's only done about 6 or 7 of them. But in this lecture, you get to see all of them that she has done, and it's remarkable, remarkable.
Yeah.
So get that lecture from the store.
Yeah. Yvonne was asking, how do you do this kind of work? in a lying down position when the client is really agitated, has lots of emotional difficulties.
Right. So that's very common, especially in the autistic world. So those are games that you learn to play and tricks that you learn to do. And eventually they will calm down. You saw the two boys that were just totally off the charts with their autistic behavior, but then they began to get it. And it's so amazing. I mean, once their body experiences, and one of our really severe children in the spectrum, I want to make this long story short. I asked him years later, after he is now so beautifully self-regulated, he's written a book and everything. I asked him what of the work that you received was the most beneficial. He said, without a doubt, the autistic world needs tactile. And so when we start doing tactile, they start relaxing and then they start wanting it. And pretty soon they're on the table for an hour, and that's okay. Then you can get to work.
Yeah, I've had kids whose parents started getting the work too, just because they're like,
yeah,
I could use this. And so I think we went through a lot. If anyone wants to unmute, oh, are the courses in Spanish? I think there are a few courses in different languages, depending on where the instructors are at. There are a few courses in different languages, right?
Yeah. Yeah, we have somebody an instructor that speaks Spanish. Normally, though, we have interpreters. I teach in class in countries that don't have English-speaking people, and I just have an interpreter there.
Yeah, and Kimberly, hi. That's my old boss. She's still my boss now, actually.
Okay, hi, Kimberly.
She wants to know what's the best classes, the first classes to take.
The first classes to take are dynamic and postural, reflex integration, and Will is going to send you some links of those classes that are coming up soon. Second one is tactile, and that's only 2 days. The first one is 32 hours. Tactile is 16 hours, so it's shorter, but it gives you a lot of tools to make a huge difference immediately. And then the third one that we recommend, because we've got, I don't know how many classes we have, it's just this boatload of classes, but these are prerequisites for any of the advanced training anyway. And then the third one is Archetype, and that's the movements at the foundation. Any of them are really good. Any of them are good. Okay, so we did it.